Okay. And Madan Gopal Singh, he is always enthralling us with music. So most of our guests are from the Punjabi department, University of Delhi. They'll expect that we Southern talks are promoting Punjabi. We should start with Punjabi, isn't it? And my colleague, our deputy director, she finds little difficulty in speaking Punjabi. She'll try, isn't it? Sarbpreet Singh is not new to us. Earlier we released his book, Camel Merchant of Philadelphia. It was a very intriguing title. Who is this? Alexander Gardner. The title was so catchy. I read the book. There was a lot of audience, and then the publisher and others, they got a lot of credit. I hope publisher Ravi Singh will be joining. Tanu is here to represent him. I'm very happy on a rather short notice and a difficult day because everyone is scaring there's diversion, this and that. You don't go. Still, we got very good audience, a mixed audience, senior professors, young students, and I won't stand much between you and the author. I request my colleague, Professor Manjeet Bhatia, to formally welcome the author and other guests, please.
थैंक यू सर ਮੈਨੂੰ ਲੱਗਦਾ ਮੈਂ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਕਰਾਂ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਸਰ ਨੇ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਬੋਲੀ ਅਤੇ ਇਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਕਿਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਮੈਂ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਬੋਲਦੀ ਆਈ ਥੋਟ ਮੈਂ ਥੋੜ੍ਹੀ ਤੇ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਬੋਲਦੇ ਹਾਂ So today's event is weaved around the book, The Sufi's Nightingale, written by the well-known writer who is here, Sarbpreet Singh ji. He is the author of the acclaimed bestsellers, which one of them, which Dr. Manmohan Singh has, and Dr. Mahinder Singh also mentioned, The Camel Merchant of Philadelphia. The title is intriguing because we don't know what exactly it means. I mean, what do you mean by Camel Merchants of Philadelphia? The Night of Restless Spirit, Stories of 1984, and Stories of Sikhs, 1469, 1708. His history podcast, The Story of Sikhs, has listeners in 90 countries. His work has been featured on the BBC and National Public Radio, and his commentary has appeared in publications in the US, India, and Pakistan. He's also founder of the Gurmat Sangat project dedicated to the preservation of sacred Sikh music. So the book, which he will be talking about, a little bit about the book. Sufi's Nightingale is fictionalized retelling of the life story of 16th century mystic and the poet of Panjab, Shah Hussain, which means undivided Punjab, who was a Malamati, I don't know whether I'm pronouncing it correctly. So a Sufi who actually debased himself, choosing a lifestyle that would earn him rejection and abuse, as a means of conquering his ego. Further, as the inner of the jacket of the book describes, told in the voices of Hussain and Maqbool, the Sufi's Nightingale is among the most moving and beautiful novels about the wonders and mysteries of love and faith that Sarbpreet ji will illustrate to all of us. So today, Anita is not there, so who is our guest speaker? But today's speaker is Professor Ishwar Dayal Gaur, who teaches history, who was trained in history, but has changed gears, and he has research on. He's diversified himself into studies on culture, folklore, and literature. He has authored essays on history and historiography, 1998. Now, this interest of his is actually comes out in all his talks, which I could attend 2 of them. And most of the time, I understand that why he's talking about historiography and not history. So, he is also a poet, which is very interesting. He's a trained historian. He got into cultural studies, and he's also a poet. He has versified cultural mosaic of undivided Punjab in 2 collections, namely Sur Maidani, 1999, and Chakra Bol Sai Sai, 2007. Charkha, I'm so sorry. Charkha Bol Sai Sai. Today's panel is being chaired by Professor Madan Gopal. He's an Indian composer, singer, lyricist, actor, screenplay writer, film theorist, editor, and a polyglot. He was a senior fellow at Teen Murthy, and Madan Gopal Singh has written and lectured extensively on cinema, art, culture, history, besides performing the world over as a singer with his ensemble Char Yar. Now, we will wait for Anita ji and I'll introduce her later. But today's panel is being chaired by Professor Madan Gopal. So over to Professor Madan Gopal ji. Okay. Ravi Singh ji, welcome. I think that you are the publisher for the book. Yeah, thank you so much for being here.
Hello? Okay, wonderful. So I feel a little unnerved because I've never chaired a program which has two eminent persons sitting right next to me. One of them an eminent author, the other too is an author of great eminence. So ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਬੈਠਾ ਮੈਂ ਥੋੜਾ ਜਿਹਾ ਅੱਜ ਨਰਵਸ ਹੈ ਲੇਕਿਨ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਖੁਸ਼ੀ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਪ੍ਰੋਫੈਸਰ ਗੌਰ ਅੱਛਾ ਮੈਂ ਇੱਕ ਗੱਲ ਕਹਿ ਦਿਆਂ ਕਿ ਮੈਂ ਥੋੜੀ ਛੋਟੀ ਮੋਟੀ ਕੋਸ਼ਿਸ਼ ਕੀਤੀ ਸੀ ਪ੍ਰੋਫੈਸਰ ਬਣਨ ਦੀ ਲੇਕਿਨ ਮੈਂ ਬਣ ਨਹੀਂ ਸਕਿਆ ਸੋ ਮੈਂ ਡਾਕਟਰ ਮਦਨ ਗੋਪਾਲ ਤੱਕ ਹੀ ਰਹਿ ਗਿਆ ਮਤਲਬ ਐਂਡ ਆਈ ਲਾਈਕ ਦੈਟ ਐਨੀਵੇ ਸੋ ਮੈਂ ਪਹਿਲੋਂ ਇਨਵਾਈਟ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ ਸੱਦਾ ਦੇ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ ਪ੍ਰੋਫੈਸਰ ਗੌਰ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਨੂੰ ਕਿ ਉਹ ਆਪਣਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੈ ਆਈ ਥਿੰਕ ਇਟਸ ਇਸ ਕਿਤਾਬ ਬਾਰੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਕੋਲ ਜੋ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕਮੈਂਟਸ ਨੇ ਉਹ ਪਹਿਲੋਂ ਆਉਣਗੇ ਐਂਡ ਜਾਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਪਹਿਲੋਂ ਬੋਲੋਗੇ ਜੀ okay yes so what we are going to do is to first invite the author Sarbpreet Singh ji to briefly introduce the book, and then it'll be followed by these in-depth sort of comments on the novel, and then we'll open the discussion to the whole house, and that'll be followed by music. So there you go.
Thank you, Dr. Madan Gopal Singh ji. I'm absolutely delighted to be back at the Bhai Veer Singh Sahitya Sadan, and I'd like to thank Dr. Mahinder Singh ji and the organizers for inviting me back. I was last here 4 years ago when we launched the Camel Merchant of Philadelphia, and one of my biggest regrets was that my last 2 books were launched in the pandemic and I could not come back and go to all of those wonderful fora where I'd had such lovely discussions. And I feel blessed that I'm able to do this with this book. So I'm also very eager to hear Dr. Gaur's comments. So I will keep mine very, very brief. I'll tell you a tiny bit about myself and my journey, and most importantly, what brought me to Shah Hussain. So I left this country as a young man. I was about 24 years old. I had been raised in Sikkim, and I went to engineering school in Bits Pilani. So I was as far removed from Punjabi and Punjabi culture as one can possibly be, living in India. Furthermore, being educated in, a typical public school environment which valued all things Western, that was exactly my state of mind when I left this country. I didn't have much of a desire to engage with anything Indian, much less Punjabi. And somewhat ironically, after I moved to the US, I started engaging with, my own culture and my own roots through a serendipitous set of circumstances. Needless to say, it was a journey that was very, very personally enriching. Some of the things that really drew me in, and all of this relates to this book, almost at the same time in my mid-20s, I started an embrace of traditional Gurbani Kirtan or Gurmat Sangeet and North Indian classical music or Shastriya Sangeet, which really, became an integral part of my life and has been for decades now. In Gurmat Sangeet in particular, I spent a lot of time collecting old compositions, then learning how to sing old compositions, and started teaching young children mostly in my orbit. So before I came to Shah Hussain, I was very immersed in Sikh sacred music. I was, as a practitioner and a listener, I was immersed in North Indian classical music as a listener. And also, while I was pursuing my career, which was in the field of technology, I'm a refugee from the world of technology. Dr. Madan Gopal Singh ji very kindly called me an eminent author. I am no such thing. I'm quite the dilettante, and I'm very new. I'm often awed by the presence of scholars who've been doing this for decades. And when I was hearing Dr. Madan Gopal Singh ji talk about his childhood and the books that he read, I felt a twinge of envy because I had to discover all of these things on my own much, much later in life. But I digress. So I had been pursuing my interest in the music of the Indian subcontinent, in particular Sikh sacred music. And I had been immersing myself in history for quite some time, and I'd started to write. The Camel Merchant of Philadelphia had been published, which is a retelling of the court of Maharaja Ranjit Singh. And also my Story of the Sikhs, which is a retelling of the lives of the Sikh gurus, mostly drawing upon our own sources and informed heavily by translations of our poetry. I had already engaged with all of that, and I was in the midst of all of that. Now, when I left India, I didn't read Gurmukhi. I taught myself to read Gurmukhi in my late 20s, and even when I was researching my work, my engagement with Gurmukhi and Punjabi was limited to things that I needed to read as research for my work. Bhai Veer Singh onwards, and the writers that Bhai Veer Singh pointed me to. So I had never engaged much with Punjabi literature. Quite by accident, I, quote, stumbled upon the Kafis of Shah Hussain. I was really taken most by the exquisite articulation of the agony of separation that I found in Shah Hussain's Kafis. That is what first drew me in. And then, that engendered some amount of curiosity. I started reading a little bit about Shah Hussain, and I learned that his Kafis were written to be sung. I didn't know that. So I thought, let me try singing them. And I started creating little compositions, and I started singing some of his Kafis, the Kafis that particularly spoke to me. And before I even thought of writing a single word about Shah Hussain, I sang Shah Hussain. Not for anyone, just for myself. I just sat and sang. At some point, I really wanted to know more about the man whose poems had affected me so at such a deep, deep level. And then I started reading about Shah Hussain. And, since I write nonfiction as well, I thought, why not write a biography of Shah Hussain? It's not that the world doesn't know Shah Hussain, but I figured that modern readers perhaps could be introduced to this great poet. And I started casting about for references. I managed to get my hands on an out-of-print book by Professor Mohan Singh Diwana, who perhaps can be credited with first compiling Shah Hussein's Kafis and presenting them to the world. I found the work of some other academics. I found a fair amount of lore, but I did not find a lot of history, which is not very surprising because history has extensive records of kings and emperors, but not that many of fakirs. So the Emperor Jahangir actually had commissioned somebody, a Bahar Khan, to write about Shah Hussain. So Bahar Khan did painstakingly, he wrote a Roznamcha, wrote a diary, wrote about Shah Hussain, but that book has been lost. None of our scholars in their works reference the book. They just mention that it existed. So I was deeply disappointed because there simply wasn't enough material to write a biography of Shah Hussain. So, since I also write fiction, I decided to cheat. I felt that I could perhaps use whatever historical knowledge that I had been able to glean, and then weaving the Kafis of Shah Hussain into the narrative, I thought perhaps I could imagine the rest. And that is the Sufi's Nightingale. At the most fundamental level, the Sufi's Nightingale is homage to the exquisite poetry of Shah Hussain, which has touched me like nothing else in my life until now. So with that brief introduction, I'll turn it over to Dr. Gaur.
I'm used to dais because I'm a teacher. Hazreen, I congratulate Shri Sarbpreet Singh ji for composing a masterpiece, the Sufi's Nightingale, that centered around Shah Hussain, a Sufi of the 16th century. And he very skillfully weaves the feelings, sentiments, imagination, and intellect in the Sufi's Nightingale. Now, as a student of history and culture, when I was reading this wonderful book, I myself start constructing a large canvas of this novel. 16th century, I was trying to situate this book on a large canvas. 16th century was the century of Baba Nanak. He breathed his last in 1539, and incidentally, in that very year, Shah Hussain was born. And so it was a century when sociological, anthropological, and the cosmic hues fused together. And the credit goes first to Baba Nanak. और उनकी रिफ्लेक्शंस जो हैं, उसका अक्स जो है, वो हमें शाह हुसैन की काफ़ियों में नज़र आता है, अगर हमने बाबा नानक को पढ़ा हो. So Shah Hussain illumines the fusion of the Kafis in his Kafis through the archetypal lovers Heer and Dhido Ranjha. And it was a century, incidentally also a century of a Damodar Gulati, who was the first Kissaka who composed the love legend of Heer Ranjha in the Kissa Yonar. And it was also a century of Chaju Bhagat. It was also a century of Deen-e-Ilahi, when Akbar was introducing peace for all, जिसको हम actually Deen-e-Ilahi के लिए एक technical word है हमारे लिए, वो है सुलेकुल, peace for all. It was century of Akbar also. So it was century of zikr. It was century of a zikr, remembrance of the beloved, not of the Lord, not of the God. It was a century of zikr, and it was a century of sama. It was a century of a rusk. It was a century of a mekhana. It was a century of Dulla Bhatti also, a legendary rebel who rebelled against the Mughal state. And it was a century of open-ended devotionality embodied in Shri Guru Granth Sahib. And it was a century of Mian Mir. It was a century of Harmandir Sahib, a century of ultimately non-conformism and counter-hegemony. So a century that resonates with the issue of existentialism. It was a very complex kind of a century of the, technically speaking, because professors, university teachers are also there, a century of, if I want to reduce this century into one word, it was a century of a semiotic universe. Such was the canvas against which I read this novel. So the facts, these are not the facts, rather these are the facets of history. So these facets of history, they are scattered. They are floating in a isolated positions. So to structure them together is a problematic of the craft of writing history, even for a historian, even for a novelist. To bring the scattered facts into one narrative is a difficult task. So the issue of the structuration and signification, the meanings, is significant. If one is interested in unfolding the spirit or the Geist, what we call it, of the history, so one should also weave this kind of a canvas which I have just presented before you. Because after all, what is? Everything is a story. Story, before its domestication into the discipline of a history, was a wonderful tool for understanding history with capital H. Because it was put into the straitjackets of the facts. Facts is not a history simply. So a reading of Sufi's Nightingale makes one realize that past cannot be intelligibly and aesthetically perceived, written, and read without imaginative insights. That's important. This is the word that this kind of imaginative or imagination is conspicuously missing in the craft of writing the professional history. So rooted in mythical and historical time and space, such insights illumine a complex flux of history, human history, the divine history, as well as the history of flora and fauna. Because we are all integrated. I'll tell you later on about this also. So the poet operates upon the material supplied to him by his senses, imagination, and intellect. These are the three things which are involved in the Sufi's Nightingale. Therefore, it is argued that legends and traditions should not be dismissed as mere figments of fantasy. Rather, one must excavate their historical kernel by getting to the bottom of their inner core. Sarbpreet Sufi's Nightingale obliges one to draw a distinction between facts of history and spirit of history. This is the major contribution of this novel. Spirit of history flows imperceptibly in the structure or in the cosmology of history. So the novel, the Sufi's Nightingale, begins with its cover. You look at the cover of this. Actually, novel begins from the cover itself. How it begins? The Nightingale is surrounded by 3 red roses. What is hidden in the title is, what needs to be perceived, imagined, is that the Nightingale is herself a rose. That is the 4th rose which is hidden in the title. And actually she is engaged. You look minutely at the Nightingale, you will find that she is engaged, engrossed in the invisible fragrance. And fragrance is a very complex motif in the Sufi poetry or in the poetry of devotionality. I'll quote after a few lines how the fragrance is important and what is the meaning of the fragrance in the devotional literature. So it is right that she is contemplating. The Nightingale is contemplating, and it recalls Baba Farid's slok that is incorporated in Shri Guru Granth Sahib, Kali Koyal tu kit gun kali. Apne Pritam ke hiyo birha jali. She is engaged in this kind of a contemplation. She is engaged in this kind of a reflections. Those who argue that in devotionality there is only a faith, there is no reason, they are mistaken. Reason is very much rooted in devotionality. This is what the Nightingale is doing. And Baba Farid, in his slok, he never uses the word, the translation Nightingale, the bulbul, no, koil. Bulbul is a Persian motif. Koil is an indigenous motif. Try to, this is just a passing reference, how Baba Farid was enrooted in the Retal, in the indigenous soil. So the Nightingale knows about the advice of Baba Farid about the fragrance. She is surrounded by the fragrance, herself is a fragrance, and Baba Farid said, Farida Raat Kutheri Vandiye Sutya Mile na Pao, Jinna Nain Nirandre, Tinna Milan Kua. Farid, the musk is distributed at night, but its share does not fall to the lot of ones who falls asleep. How could those whose eyes have drooped to sleep obtain it? Fragrance, मैं तुहानू एक पासिंग रेफर दसां, जिन्हां ने हाशम दा सस्सी पुन्नू पढ़िया होया है. हाशम पुन्नू नू सस्सी दी गोद दे विचों चकदे उदों ही ने, उदों सस्सी पुन्नू किडनैप किया जाता है, when sassi is lost in the fragrance of the punnu. Because she was not aware about it, that fragrance is distributed at night, and one is supposed to be awake at that night also. So, in the title cover, the Nightingale critiques what is called in Sufism ghaflat. Ghaflat means ignorance. So, Nightingale is a multi-layered symbol. So she critiques the ghaflat. And the best critique of ghaflat is given by Bulle Shah. Uth jaag karade maar nahi. Bulle begins his kafi with this thing. So, fragrance that I have just mentioned affects us emotionally. It affects us psychologically and also physically. So this influences that we are engaged with history through imagination and intellect. Archival history deals with Sufis, Sufism, but what is important is how Sufiness is constituted. For me, as a student of a cultural history, it's not important to know what is Sufism and who were the Sufis, how they came. No. for me how Sufism is or Sufiness is constituted and how Sufiness vibrates in the poetry of Shah Hussain. That's important for me. So to know the Sufiness is a crucial matter, issue. So how a Sufi covers the prosaic and linear journey of a textual scholarship and reaches or attains the stage of poetic and lyricality. That stage is very difficult. How you transcend the prose and how you enter into the domain of poetry. Poetry means lyricality. ऐदा नहीं नचदा ना लाहौर दियां गलियां दे विच शाह हुसैन. क्यों? Because आगे मैं एक आर्गूमेंट दे रहा हूं. In the chapter 10th of the novel, if you read the 10th chapter of this novel, you will come to know what does it mean, what it mean to say lyricality. Shah Hussain himself tells. Quote, Shah Hussain das raha, I was unconvinced. I managed to persuade myself that I had just got into an intellectual rut. After all, I had been studying the same subject for more than 10 years. I was saturated. I told myself, I decided that I would spend my time studying something new, a way of refreshing my mind. Unquote. In the library of the seminary of his Murshid, Maulana Sayyid Daula, Shah Hussain was the disciple of Maulana Sayyid Daula. वो लाहौर में थी और अभी उसकी कभी फिर बात हो सकती है, पर फिलहाल आपके मैं यही अर्ज़ कर रहा हूँ कि नावल में जो है वो कमाल की चीज़ है नावल की एक कि सैयद दौला की लाइब्रेरी में a book of a Ibn Arabi, an Andalusian Sufi scholar, जिसको हम स्पेनिश स्कॉलर कहते हैं, इब्न अरबी की किताब वहाँ पढ़ी हुई है. शाह दौला बाकी सब कुछ पढ़ा रहा है शाह हुसैन को कुरान पढ़ा रहा है, उसकी इंटरप्रिटेशंस बता रहा है और बहुत कुछ फ़िक़ा पढ़ा रहा है, बहुत कुछ पढ़ा रहा है. पर जब वो बाहर जाता है तो वो शाह हुसैन को कहता है कि लाइब्रेरी का जो वो खाना है ना वहाँ नहीं जाना. क्यों? वो फॉरबिडन ट्री है, वहाँ फॉरबिडन बुक्स पढ़ी हैं. किसकी? इब्न अरबी की. अब शाह हुसैन के माइंड में एक क्यूरियोसिटी है. वो कहता है कि क्यों मैं ये बार बार मेरे को कुरान पढ़ा रहा है, बार बार कोई फ़िक़ा पढ़ा रहा है, जूरिस्प्रूडेंस पढ़ा रहा है, ये मैं वो किताब क्यों, क्या चीज़ है? तो एक क्या होता है इत्फाकिया, द गुरु इज़ बाहर चले जाते हैं अपनी सेमिनरी से, तो वो क्या कहता है, वो किताब को खोलता है, वो इब्न अरबी की किताब होती है. फ्रेंड्स, मैं भी, मेरे लिए भी इब्न अरबी बड़ा डार्लिंग है. मैं इब्न अरबी को कोशिश करता हूँ मेरे को कभी सपने में भी दिखाई दे. आई एम फैन ऑफ इब्न अरबी. आई रेड लॉट ऑफ इब्न अरबी ऑल्सो. दिस इज आउट ऑफ ह्यूमिलिटी आई से. तो वो इब्न अरबी को जब वो देखता है तो उसके मन में क्या आता है, एक बिल्कुल ट्रांसफॉर्मेशन आ जाती है. इब्न अरबी was the first scholar of Sufism who introduced the revolutionary doctrine of Wahdat al-Wujud. Wahdat al-Wujud क्या है? The philosophy of unity, जिसकी किसी ज़माने में प्लेटो और एरिस्टोटल बात करते हैं. उसको फिर हम देख सकते हैं कि हाउ दिस वहदत अल-वजूद केम फ्रॉम, उसकी ओरिजिन्स को हम देख, वो एक अलग बात है. पर वहदत अल-वजूद क्या है कि वो यूनिटी ऑफ बीइंग्स देखता, पूरी कायनात को एक कॉस्मिक देख रहा है. और जो थियोलॉजिन है, चाहे वो इस्लाम का थियोलॉजिन है, चाहे वो हिंदुइज्म का थियोलॉजिन है, चाहे वो सिखिज्म का थियोलॉजिन्स है, मान लो, वो कभी नहीं चाहता, वो क्या कहता है कि देयर इज ए डिफरेंस बिटवीन द क्रिएटर एंड द क्रिएटेड. इट वाज द इब्न अरबी हु इंट्रोड्यूस्ड द आइडिया दैट द क्रिएटर एंड द क्रिएटेड दे आर वन, दे आर फ्यूज्ड टुगेदर. So that changed the life of Shah Hussain, and because It was, technically speaking, Ibn Arabi talks about the dialectics of transcendence and representation. That is the beauty of Ibn Arabi. So, it is only the Ibn Arabi's Wahdat al-Wujud that helps Sufi kill his nafs. Nafs means lower instincts. Nafs means lower instincts, instincts which are attached in the anthropological or in the sociological domain. तो नफ्स को मारना ही एक सूफी का, एक भगत का, एक गुरु, सबसे बड़ा कि नफ्स, आप अपने नफ्स को कैसे मारते हैं. तो ये तो नफ्स क्या है, शाह दैला के अंदर तो पूरी नफ्स पड़ी हुई है कि क्या, कि मैं बहुत बड़ा स्कॉलर हूं, ये नफ्स है एक. वो कहता है यही किताबें पढ़. तो इब्ने अरबी को पढ़ के जो सूफी है, दिस इज हाउ दिस सूफीनेस ओरिजिनेट्स इन शाह हुसैन. It was the beginning of the Sufiness. So then the Sufiness starts growing. Shah Hussain asks, I'm quoting from the book of Professor Sarbpreet Singh ji. Shah Hussain asks, why did my scholarship of 30 years seems to me so empty and meaningless now? Such question is directly related with nafs. The issue of nafs is highlighted by Sarbpreet through a debate between Shah Hussain and Maulana Sahidullah over the issue of Sama also, a mystic and a devotional dance. So the Murshid feels offended. Now, Shah Hussain attempts to justify the Sama with the help of ayat from the Quran. The theologian Maulana says that there is no Sama in Sufism because there is no Sama in Sufism. There is no Sama in Islam, but Sama is in Sufism also. So this was the contention. Incidentally, Shah Hussain जो आयत एक दिन उस्ताद पढ़ा रहा है, उसी आयत को शाह हुसैन और ढंग से इंटरप्रेट करता है. कब करता है? जब उसने इब्ने अरबी को पढ़ रखा है. क्या कहता है? आयत says the life of the world is nothing but play and pleasurable distraction. शाह हुसैन ਨੂੰ ਤਾਂ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਨਾ ਦੇਖੀ ਬੋਲਿਆ, ਕਹਿੰਦਾ ਅੱਗ ਨਾਲ ਆਦੀ, ਕਹਿੰਦਾ ਗੱਲ ਇੱਥੇ ਆ ਗਈ, ਹੁਣ ਤਾਂ ਲਾਵਾਂਗੇ. शाह हुसैन ਨੂੰ ਤਾਂ ਪਤਾ ਲੱਗ ਗਿਆ ਕਿ ਇਹ ਤਾਂ ਆਇਤ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਜਸਟੀਫਾਈ ਕਰ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ. Shah Hussain, metaphorically speaking, Shah Hussain became lyrical. He ceased to be prosaic. Now, this is the only way of life of sincerity, and it's the only way to throw the constraints of ascetic piety, legal rectitude, and rational seriousness. Shah Hussain ने सबको त्याग दिया. Rather, he would lead his life as a child at play, abandoning all pretenses, all hypocrisies, all ambitions, as well as fear of social blame. This is what Shah Hussain. Later on, this was theorized by Bulle Shah. Bullya aashik hoye Rabb da, malamat hoi lakh, loki kafir kafir aakh de, tu aho aho aakh. Now, this is the legacy of the Shah Hussain. Now, thus the Murshid felt offended when Shah Hussain interpreted this ayat in his own way to justify the Sama. The Murshid, a renowned theologian of Lahore, has not yet been able to exterminate nafs from him. हो ही नहीं पाया. नफ्स क्यों? Because he was not ready to listen to his murid. He was not ready to engage in dialogue. जब लग दुनिया रही नानक, किच सुनिए, किच कहिए. Shah Hussain has imbibed this message also. There's no written records. Try to understand the kafis of Shah Hussain from the margins. That's important. So, he does not deal with the basic issue of existence and wujud. Who is not dealing? The mullah. शाह हुसैन इज डीलिंग विद द बेसिक इशू ऑफ वजूद. इंसान का वजूद बेसिक, उसका बुनियादी सवाल ये है कि मेरा वजूद क्या है. क्या मेरा वजूद मेरा मुर्शिद तय करेगा या मैं करूँगा? तो ये जो क्या है, वजूद है, वजूद की लड़ाई हो रही है. वो कह रहा है तू मौजूद है. It was a war between the Majood and the Wajood. That's important in Shah Hussein's Kafi. Thus, Shah Hussain left the seminary and came to dwelling that in his own room. Shah Hussain ਉਸ ਮਦਰਸੇ ਨੂੰ ਛੱਡ ਕੇ ਹੀ ਆਪਣੇ ਕੋਠੜੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਆ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਲਾਹੌਰ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ. ਉੱਥੇ ਕੀ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਹੈ? These are the mysteries of Sufism, which can be understood at the level of imagination also. Everything is not rational in life. ਉਸ ਦਿਨ ਰਾਤ ਉਸ ਨੂੰ ਇੱਕ ਬੜੀ ਅਜੀਬੋ ਗਰੀਬ ਇੱਕ ਸੰਤ ਮਿਲਦੇ ਨੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਉੜਦੀ ਹੋਈ ਦਰੀ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਬੈਠ ਕੇ ਉਸ ਨੂੰ ਸੁਪਨੇ 'ਚ ਦਿਖਾਈ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਨੇ. ਐਕਚੁਅਲੀ ਉਹ ਕੀ ਹੈ, ਕੌਣ? The novelist would not tell. He leaves everything to the readers. To me, Shah Hussain Ibn Arabi ਪੜ੍ਹਿਆ ਹੋਇਆ ਅਤੇ Ibn Arabi ਉਸ ਨੂੰ ਦਿਖਾਈ ਦਿੰਦਾ ਇੱਕ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦਾ ਉਸ ਨੂੰ ਡਰੀਮਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ. ਅਤੇ ਨਾਵਲਕਾਰ ਇਹ ਲਿਖ ਰਿਹਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਕਿ ਉਸ ਨੂੰ ਉਹ ਕੀ ਦਿੰਦਾ, ਲਾਲ ਖਿਰਕਾ ਦਿੰਦਾ, ਲਾਲ ਚੋਲਾ ਦਿੰਦਾ ਪਾਉਣ ਦਾ. ਨੋ ਲਾਲ ਚੋਲਾ ਉਸ ਨੂੰ ਦਿੰਦਾ ਸੁਪਨੇ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ. ਅਤੇ that khirka creates a problem. That robe, chola of red color, that is bestowed upon Shah Hussain in dreams by a saint, by Ibn Arabi or any saint. That creates a problem because it's a sacred costume to be worn by a Sufi. Second, it's red color. Red color is not less than a blasphemy in Islam. So, in the opinion of the Islamic theologians, if not in Islam, but in the opinion of the Islamic theologians, red is a very blasphemic color. So, Shah Hussain speaks, my red khirka seemed to offend the pious worthies. It was the color of licentious women, not of Sufi fakirs. This is what it has been recorded in the novel. So red khirka means, why the Islamic theologians are so much offended by the red khirka? Because the red cloak is the symbol of spousal relationship with the Lord. Spousal relationship with the Lord, that is important. And that's why, because once a Sufi wears a khirka, particularly of a red color, it may be any color, but khirka is always red. It depends upon you how you conceive the khirka. That's why right from Baba Farid to Ghulam Farid, the entire period of 800 years in the Punjabi Sufi poetry, nowhere God is addressed as a God. It's addressed in the spousal terms, Yar, Khasam, Pritam, Sai, Pyara. That was the problem of that khirka was very problematic. So, जब वो खिरका उस पर पहन लिया उसने, तब शाह हुसैन का पूरा सूफी बन गया. सूफी नस जो है उसके अंदर पूरी आ गई है. और फिर क्या है, तभी तो शाह हुसैन ऐसी थोड़ा कहता है. जैसे उसने खिरका पहना तो एक अपनी काफ़ी के अंदर क्या लिखता है वो, कि मैं ऐसे हूँ सवा शेर की मस्ती. दिस इज़ द फ्रेज ऑफ शाह हुसैन, कि मेरे ते कहना मैं सवा शेर मस्त हूँ, मैनू कोई परवाह नहीं हैगी किसी चीज़ की. सो दैट्स खिरका. सो फिर की करता शाह हुसैन नो क्या कर, ही ड्रिंक्स रेड, नॉट वाइन, ही ड्रिंक्स रेड, ही beholds red, and he wears red. It recalls me one sentence. ਇੱਕ ਥਾਂ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਕਬੀਰ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਨੇ, ਮਾਧੋ ਜਲ ਕੀ ਪਿਆਸ ਨਾ ਜਾਏ. Shah Hussain is ceaselessly thirsty. ਉਹਨੂੰ ਪਿਆਸ ਲੱਗੀ ਹੋ ਰਹਿੰਦੀ ਹੈ ਕਬੀਰ ਵਾਂਗੂ। ਪਿਆਸ ਕਿਸ ਦੀ ਹੈ? ਉਸ ਨੂੰ ਪਿਆਸ ਵਿਦਿਨ ਕੋਟਸ, ਉਸ ਨੂੰ ਪਿਆਸ ਸ਼ਰਾਬ ਦੀ ਹੈ, ਮੈਖਾਨੇ ਦੀ ਹੈ, ਸਮਾਂ ਦੀ ਆ, ਉਸ ਨੂੰ ਬਿਲਵਡ ਦੀ ਆ। ਸ਼ਾਹ ਹੁਸੈਨ ਮਸਤਾਨਾ ਹੋ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਅਤੇ ਲਾਹੌਰ ਦੀਆਂ ਗਲੀਆਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਨੱਚਦਾ ਫਿਰਦਾ ਹੈਗਾ। ਫਰੈਂਡਸ, ਇਫ ਯੂ ਆਰ ਫੈਮਲੀਅਰ ਵਿਦ the devotional domain of Punjab region, which I have just mentioned you from Farid to Ghulam Farid, you will come to know about the counter-hegemonic discourse constituted by the red khirka. Khirka means chola. So it signifies devotionality and eroticism. सूफीज़्म में दो आते हैं, एक वहदतल वजूद है, एक वहदतल शूद है। वहदतल शूद होता है कि क्रिएशन और खुदा में और फ़र्क होता है, खलक और खालक में फ़र्क है। पर वहदतल वजूद जैसे ही आप खिरका पहनते हो तो वो सब कुछ उसमें डिवोशनैलिटी एंड एरोटिसिज्म दे फ्यूज टुगेदर। सो ये जो है ये फ़र्क मिटा देता है। तो पांचवें गुरु एक जगह शायद लिखते हैं कि फरीदा खालक खलक में, खलक वसे रब में, मंदा किसनू आखिए ਜਾਂ ਤਿਸ ਬਿਨ ਕੋਈ ਨਾ ਹੋ। ਤੋ ਉਸ ਦੀ ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਕੌਣ ਮਾੜਾ ਹੈ, ਕੌਣ ਬੰਦਾ ਹੈ, ਕੌਣ ਨਰ ਹੈ, ਕੌਣ ਨਾਰੀ ਹੈ, ਇਹ ਸਭ ਕੁਝ ਖਤਮ ਹੋ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਉਸ ਸਟੇਜ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ। ਇਫ ਯੂ ਰੀਡ ਦੀ ਬਾਣੀ ਆਫ ਬਾਬਾ ਨਾਨਕ ਯੂ ਵਿਲ ਕਮ ਅਕ੍ਰੋਸ ਸੋ ਮੈਨੀ ਕਪਲੇਟਸ ਆਫ ਬਾਬਾ ਜੀ ਅਬਾਊਟ ਦਿਸ ਕਾਈਂਡ ਆਫ ਏ ਹੋਲਿਸਟਿਕ ਵਿਜ਼ਨ ਔਰ ਦੀ ਕਾਸਮਿਕ ਵਿਜ਼ਨ ਆਫ ਬਾਬਾ that reflects very conspicuously in the ਕਾਫੀਸ ਆਫ ਦੀ ਸ਼ਾਹ ਹੁਸੈਨ। ਬਾਬਾ ਜੀ, ਮੈਂ ਇਹੀ ਕਹਿ ਰਿਹਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਕਿ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਜ਼ਰੂਰਤ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਪੂਰੀ ਚੀਜ਼ ਨੂੰ ਇੰਟੀਗ੍ਰੇਟਿਡ ਹੋਲਿਸਟਿਕ ਵੇ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਪੜ੍ਹੀਏ। ਇਹ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਸਮਝ ਨਹੀਂ ਆਉਂਦੀ ਹੈਗੀ ਕਿ ਕਿਵੇਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਦੇ ਐਡੇ ਵੱਡੇ ਸੂਫੀ ਕਾਵ ਨੂੰ ਅਸੀਂ ਗੁਰਮਤਿ ਕਾਵ, ਸੂਫੀ ਕਾਵ, ਭਗਤੀ ਕਾਵ 'ਚ ਕਿਵੇਂ ਵੰਡ ਲਿਆ। ਗੁਰੂ ਗ੍ਰੰਥ ਸਾਹਿਬ 'ਚ ਇਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੀ ਵੰਡ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈਗੀ। ਇਟਸ ਓਨਲੀ ਦੀ ਲਿਟਰੇਰੀ ਹਿਸਟੋਰੀਅਨਸ ਦੋ ਹੈਜ਼ ਕੰਸਟਰਕਟਡ ਸੱਚ ਕਾਈਂਡ ਆਫ ਡਿਵੀਜ਼ਨਸ। ਕਿਉਂ? ਜਦੋਂ ਮੈਂ ਰੈੱਡ ਖਿਰਕੇ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਦਾ ਤਾਂ ਇਮੀਡੀਏਟਲੀ ਟਰਾਈ ਟੂ ਰਿਲੇਟ ਦੀ ਰੈੱਡ ਖਿਰਕਾ archaeologically, not historically, with Baba Nanak, जिनके चोले रतड़े कंत तिना के पास। शाह हुसैन भी यही कर रहा है, शाह हुसैन का जोड़ा हैगा। So Nanak conceptualizes red khirka and that echoes in one of the very beautiful kafi of Shah Hussain. I'll read few lines of that kafi. Shah Hussain ਜਦੋਂ ਲਾਲ ਖਿਰਕਾ ਪਾ ਲੈਂਦਾ ਤਾਂ ਉਸ ਨੂੰ ਕਨਸੈਪਚੁਲਾਈਜ਼ ਕਰਦਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਬਾਬਾ ਨਾਨਕ ਦੀ। ਉਸ ਨੂੰ ਕਨਸੈਪਚੁਲਾਈਜ਼ ਕੀ ਕਰ ਰਿਹਾ? ਹੀ ਇਜ਼ ਕਨਸੈਪਚੁਲਾਈਜ਼ਿੰਗ not only the red color, not only the khirka, he is conceptualizing the nature of the entire devotionality of the Punjab region that is stretched from Sindh to Ganga Jamna Doab. In this beautiful kafi, he conceptualizes entire Punjab, ਪੂਰੇ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਨੂੰ, ਯਾਨੀ ਕਿ ਉਹ ਸਮੇਟ ਕੇ ਰੱਖ ਦਿੰਦਾ ਕਿ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਕੀ ਹੈ। ਸਾਲੂ ਸਹਿਜ ਹੰਡਾਲਾ ਨਹੀਂ। ਸਾਲੂ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਇੱਕ ਰੈੱਡ ਦੁਪੱਟਾ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਲੜਕੀਆਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਵਿਆਹ ਵਾਲੇ ਦਿਨ ਆਪਦੇ ਸਿਰ 'ਤੇ ਲੈਂਦੀਆਂ ਨੇ, ਉਹਨੂੰ ਸਾਲੂ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਨੇ। ਸਾਲੂ ਸਹਿਜ ਹੰਡਾਲਾ ਨਹੀਂ, ਤੂੰ ਸਾਲੂ ਸਹਿਜ ਹੰਡਾਲਾ ਨਹੀਂ। ਸਾਲੂ ਧੁਰ ਕਸ਼ਮੀਰ ਦਾ, ਕੋਈ ਆਇਆ ਬਰਫਾਂ ਚੀਰਦਾ। ਕਸ਼ਮੀਰ ਪੰਜਾਬ 'ਚ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਸੀ। ਸਾਲੂ ਧੁਰ ਕਸ਼ਮੀਰ ਦਾ, ਕੋਈ ਆਇਆ ਬਰਫਾਂ ਚੀਰਦਾ। ਸਾਲੂ ਧੁਰ ਗੁਜਰਾਤ ਦਾ, ਕਿਉਂ ਮੈਂ ਪਿਓ ਪਹਿਲੀ ਰਾਤ ਦਾ। ਇਹ ਗੁਜਰਾਤ ਪੰਜਾਬ 'ਚ ਸੋਹਣੀ ਵਾਲਾ ਪੰਜਾਬ। ਸਾਲੂ ਸੁਰ ਮੁਲਤਾਨ ਦਾ, ਕੋਈ ਰੱਬ ਦਿਲਾਂ ਦੀਆਂ ਜਾਣਦਾ। ਸਾਲੂ ਧੁਰ ਮੁਲਤਾਨ ਦਾ, ਕੋਈ ਰੱਬ ਦਿਲਾਂ ਦੀਆਂ ਜਾਣਦਾ। ਅਗਲੀ ਲਾਈਨ, ਸਾਲੂ ਮੇਰਾ ਊਨੀ ਦਾ, ਕੋਈ ਸ਼ਾਮ ਬਿੰਦਰਾ ਬਨ ਸੁਣੀ। ਦਿਸ ਇਜ਼ ਸ਼ਾਹ ਹੁਸੈਨ ਇਜ਼ ਡੂਇੰਗ। ਸ਼ਾਹ ਹੁਸੈਨ ਨੂੰ ਕ੍ਰਿਸ਼ਨ ਅਤੇ ਸੂਫੀ ਕੋਈ ਫਰਕ ਨਹੀਂ ਨਜ਼ਰ ਆ ਰਿਹਾ ਹੈਗਾ। ਇਸਲਾਮ 'ਚ ਕੋਈ ਫਰਕ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈ। ਇੱਦਾਂ ਥੋੜ੍ਹਾ ਸੀ ਕਿ ਸ਼ਾਹ ਹੁਸੈਨ ਅੱਖ 'ਚ ਰੜਕਦਾ ਸੀ ਸਟੇਟ ਦੀ 'ਚ। ਸੋ ਸਾਲੂ ਔਰ ਦੀ ਰੈੱਡ ਖਿਰਕਾ ਇਜ਼ ਅਬਵ denominational identities. It is Shah Hussain Salus that resonates in the collective cultural subconscious of the Punjab region. ਦੁਪੱਟਾ ਰੰਗ ਦੇ ਲਲਾਰੀਆ ਮੇਰਾ ਮਿੱਤਰਾਂ ਦੀ ਪੱਗ ਵਰਗਾ, ਨੀ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਮੱਸਿਆ ਚ ਪੈਣ ਭੁਲੇਖੇ ਤੇਰੀ ਵੇ ਸੰਧੂਰੀ ਪੱਗ ਦੇ। ਇਹ ਸੰਧੂਰੀ ਪੱਗ ਕਿੱਥੋਂ ਆ ਗਈ? ਇਹ ਤਾਂ ਬਾਬੇ ਤੋਂ ਚੱਲੀ ਆ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ। ਹਾਊ ਦੀ ਕਲਰ ਫਿਊਜ਼ ਟੂਗੈਦਰ। ਪੰਜਾਬ ਦੇ ਇਥੋਸ ਨੂੰ ਸਮਝਣਾ in the contemporary situation with reference to Shah Hussain and with reference to Baba Nanak is more important. So ਇਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਰੈੱਡ ਖਿਰਕਾ ਹੈਗਾ, my mentor who taught me, who still teaches me, semiotics professor Harjit Singh Gill, he interprets this kafi in a very, very scholarly and a beautiful and a very lucid manner. ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਨੇ ਕਿ in the red khirka is wrapped a universe of love and longings, of solitude and anguish, of the most mysterious depths and darkness in wilderness, which can only be imagined in the surrealistic world. In Shah Hussein's red khirka, the concept of time and space-oriented history loses its identity. Shah Hussain has become lyrical and intoxicated Sufi. He had reached the stage where invisible realities becomes visible. I again repeat it. Shah Hussain has reached the stage where invisible realities become visible and the corporeal things are spiritualized. This is where, when you, who is saying this thing? This is the Ibn Arabi is saying. ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਜਦੋਂ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਚੀਜ਼ ਵੇਖੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਜਾ ਸਕਦੀ, ਜਿਸ ਤੋਂ ਜਿਸਮ 'ਚ ਆ ਜਾਂਦੀ ਹੈ, ਅਤੇ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਜਿਸਮ ਹੈ ਜਦੋਂ ਉਹ ਦਿਖਣ ਲੱਗ ਪੈਂਦਾ ਕਿ ਉਹ ਚੀਜ਼ ਹੈ, ਤਾਂ ਕੀ ਹੈ ਫਿਰ ਸੂਫੀਨੈਸ ਉਦੋਂ ਹੈ। ਮੈਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇੱਕ ਆਰਗੂਮੈਂਟ ਦੇਵਾਂਗਾ, ਪਰ ਫਿਲਹਾਲ ਪਾਸਿੰਗ ਦੇ ਦੇਣਾ ਕਿ ਇਸ ਫਾਰਮੂਲੇਸ਼ਨ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਇਬਨ ਅਰਬੀ ਦੀ ਇਸ ਫਾਰਮੂਲੇਸ਼ਨ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਕਿ ਵੈਨ ਇਨਵਿਜ਼ੀਬਲ ਰਿਐਲਿਟੀਜ਼ ਬਿਕਮ ਵਿਜ਼ੀਬਲ, ਵਨ ਮਸਟ ਟਰਾਈ ਟੂ comprehend Shah Hussein's relation with Madho. These are not so simple relations. Only with this formulation, you can understand, you can comprehend the relation between Nanak and Mardana. Baba Kale, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਤਾਂ ਬਣਾ ਰੱਖਿਆ ਨਾ ਕਿ ਮਰਦਾਨਾ ਤਾਂ ਮਰਾਸੀ ਸੀ, ਬਾਬੇ ਨਾਲ ਰਹਿੰਦਾ ਸੀ। ਨੋ, ਭਾਈ ਗੁਰਦਾਸ ਦੀ ਵਾਰ ਪੜ੍ਹ ਕੇ ਦੇਖੋ, ਇੱਕ ਬਾਬਾ ਅਕਾਲ ਪੁਰਖ, ਦੂਜਾ ਮਰਦਾਨਾ। Because Bhai Gurdas was well acquainted also with the Ibn Arabi. ਅਸੀਂ ਉਹ ਟਰੇਸ ਹੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰ ਪਾਉਂਦੇ ਇਹ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਦੇ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਸਮਝਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਕਿ ਸਾਡੇ ਸਾਹਮਣੇ ਤਾਂ ਕੋਈ ਫੈਕਟ ਫਿਗਰਸ ਹੈਗੀਆਂ ਤਾਂ ਠੀਕ ਹੈ, ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈਗੀਆਂ। ਸੋ ਵਟ ਇਜ਼ ਬੀਂਗ ਐਮਫੇਸਾਈਜ਼ਡ ਇਜ਼ ਦੈਟ ਮਾਧੋ ਲਾਲ, ਸ਼ਾਹ ਹੁਸੈਨ, ਜ਼ਿਕਰ, ਸਮਾ, ਰਸ਼ਕ, ਮੈਖਾਨਾ, ਕੋਠਾ ਐਂਡ ਤਵਾਇਫ which figure in the novel need to be understood in the context of Ibn Arabi's Wahdat al-Wujud, and with which Shah Hussain had imbibed, and he began to sing. Now, I come to the conclusion within 3 or 4 minutes. Now, Professor Mohan Singh Diwana ਨੂੰ ਮੈਂ ਜਦੋਂ 76 'ਚ ਸਟੂਡੈਂਟ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਸੀ ਤਾਂ 15 ਸੈਕਟਰ 'ਚ ਮੈਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਘਰ ਚਲਾ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਸੀ। ਉਹ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਕਈ ਵਾਰ ਕਹਿ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਵੀ ਆ ਲੈ ਉੱਥੋਂ ਭੱਲੇ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਆ ਮੇਰੇ ਵਾਸਤੇ, ਹੈਂ, ਅਤੇ ਉਹ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਆ, ਅਤੇ ਉਹ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਸੁਣਾਉਂਦੇ ਰਹਿੰਦੇ ਹੈਗੇ। ਇੱਕ 1956 ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਦੁਨੀਆ ਦਾ ਅੰਕ ਨਿਕਲਿਆ, ਜਿਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸ਼ਾਹ ਹੁਸੈਨ ਦਾ ਵਿਸ਼ੇਸ਼ ਅੰਕ ਸੀ। ਉਹ 56 ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ। ਉਸ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਮੋਹਨ ਸਿੰਘ ਦੀਵਾਨਾ ਨੇ ਇੱਕ ਕਿਤਾਬ ਲਿਖੀ ਸ਼ਾਹ ਹੁਸੈਨ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ। ਇਹ ਮੈਂ ਥੋੜ੍ਹਾ ਜਿਹਾ ਇਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਕਰ ਰਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਟਰਾਈ what happens in historiography, how the Sufis are distorted, how the Gurus are distorted, how the Bhaktas are distorted. ਹੁਣ ਮੋਹਨ ਸਿੰਘ ਦੀਵਾਨੇ ਵਰਗਾ ਤਾਂ ਕੋਈ ਸਕਾਲਰ ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੀ ਅਰੈਬਿਕ, ਪਰਸ਼ੀਅਨ, ਅੰਗਰੇਜ਼ੀ, ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਮਤਲਬ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਤਾਂ ਲੈਟਿਨ ਲੂਟਨ ਵੀ ਆਉਂਦੀ ਸੀ, ਇਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਵਰਗਾ ਤਾਂ ਕੋਈ ਵੱਡਾ ਸਕੋਲਰ ਹੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਸੀ। ਮੈਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਕੋਲੇ ਜਾਣਾ ਅਤੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਕੋਲੇ ਬੈਠ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਅਤੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀਆਂ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਗੁੱਲਾਂ ਸੁਣ ਕੇ ਵਾਪਸ ਆ ਜਾਂਦਾ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਦਰਸ਼ਨ ਕਰਕੇ। ਅਤੇ ਕੀ ਹੋਇਆ ਕਿ 1938 ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਪਹਿਲੀ ਕਿਤਾਬ ਸੂਫੀਆਂ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਲਾਜਵੰਤੀ ਦੀ ਆਉਂਦੀ ਹੈ, ਕ੍ਰਿਸ਼ਨਾ ਲਾਜਵੰਤੀ। ਉਹਨੇ ਫਰਾਂਸ ਤੋਂ PhD ਦਾ ਥੀਸਿਸ ਸੀ, ਦੀ ਸੂਫੀਜ਼ ਆਫ ਪੰਜਾਬ। ਲਾਜਵੰਤੀ ਪਹਿਲੀ ਵਾਰ ਇਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੀ ਸ਼ਰਾਰਤ ਕਰਦੀ ਆ ਫਰਾਂਸ ਤੋਂ PhD ਕਰਕੇ ਕਿ ਉਹ ਦੱਸਦੀ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਸ਼ਾਹ ਹੁਸੈਨ ਦੇ ਮਾਧੋ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਸੈਕਸੁਅਲ ਰਿਲੇਸ਼ਨ ਸੀ। ਹੀ ਵਾਜ਼ ਅ ਹੋਮੋਸੈਕਸੁਅਲ। ਇਹ 38 ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕਿਤਾਬ ਛਪ ਜਾਂਦੀ ਹੈ, 32-33 ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਉਹ ਆਪਣਾ ਥੀਸਿਸ ਲਿਖ ਰਹੀ ਹੈਗੀ ਆ। ਕਿਤਾਬ ਜਦੋਂ ਪਬਲਿਸ਼ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਹੈ ਤਾਂ ਮੋਹਨ ਸਿੰਘ ਦੀਵਾਨਾ ਵੀ ਕਿਤਾਬ ਨੂੰ ਪੜ੍ਹਦੇ ਨੇ। ਫਿਰ ਉਹ ਕਿਤਾਬ ਨੂੰ ਪੜ੍ਹ ਕੇ ਉਹ ਬੜੀਆਂ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਕਰਦੇ ਨੇ ਅਤੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀਆਂ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਮੈਂ ਸੁਣੀਆਂ ਵੀ ਨੇ ਅਤੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀਆਂ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਰਿਟਨ 'ਚ ਵੀ ਹੈਗੀਆਂ ਨੇ। ਉਹ ਮੇਰੇ ਕੋਲ ਮੌਜੂਦ ਨੇ, ਕਿਸੇ ਨੂੰ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਹੋਵੇ ਉਹਦਾ ਪ੍ਰੂਫ ਮੈਂ ਦੇ ਸਕਦਾ, ਪਰ ਅੱਜ ਮੈਂ ਜ਼ੈਰੋਕਸ ਕਰਵਾ ਕੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਆਇਆ ਉਸ ਨੂੰ। ਉਹ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਪਰਸ਼ੀਅਨ ਦੇ ਸੋਰਸ ਮੈਂ ਵੇਖ ਰਿਹਾ ਉਹ ਮੈਂ ਇਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਵੇਖੇ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਮੈਂ ਉਹ ਪ੍ਰੋਫੈਸਰ ਮੋਹਨ ਸਿੰਘ ਦੀਵਾਨਾ ਦੇ ਸੋਰਸਿਸ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਉੱਥੋਂ ਹੀ ਮੈਂ ਇੰਸਪਾਇਰ ਹੋਇਆ। ਉਹ ਸੋਰਸਿਸ ਨੇ ਦਾਰਾ ਸ਼ਿਕੋ ਦਾ ਹਸਨਤੁਲ ਆਰਫੀਨ, these are the Persian sources, and the Khazanatul Asfiya, Mufti Ghulam Sarwar Lahori, and Haqiqatul Auliya, again Mufti Ghulam Sarwar Lahori. ਇਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕਿਤੇ ਵੀ ਜ਼ਿਕਰ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈਗਾ ਕਿ ਸ਼ਾਹ ਹੁਸੈਨ ਅਤੇ ਮਾਧੋ ਦੇ ਇਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੇ ਰਿਲੇਸ਼ਨਸ਼ਿਪ ਸੀ। Now what happens? Since Mohan Singh Diwana was very much familiar with all these Persian sources, so he raised a fundamental question ਕਿ ਇਹ ਕ੍ਰਿਸ਼ਨਾ ਸੋਪਤੀ ਕਿੱਥੋਂ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਆਈ ਹੈ, ਇਹ ਥੀਸਿਸ ਕਿੱਥੋਂ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਆਈ ਹੈ। Then he wrote, ਜਿਹੜਾ ਮੈਂ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਸਾਹਮਣੇ ਕੋਟ ਕਰਦਾ, ਇਹ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਕਿਤਾਬ ਹੈ ਸ਼ਾਹ ਹੁਸੈਨ ਦੀ, ਜਿਹੜੀ ਨਵਯੁਗ ਨੇ ਛਾਪੀ ਅਤੇ ਜਾਂ 56 ਵਾਲਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਅੰਕ ਹੈ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਦੁਨੀਆ ਦਾ, ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਦਰਜ ਹੈਗਾ। ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਨੇ, ਕੋਟ, ਆਈ ਐਮ ਕੋਟਿੰਗ ਪ੍ਰੋਫੈਸਰ ਮੋਹਨ ਸਿੰਘ ਦੀਵਾਨਾ ਵਿਦ ਡਿਊ ਰਿਸਪੈਕਟ ਟੂ ਹਿਮ, ਮਾਧੋ ਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਬਾਹਮਣ ਦੇ ਮੁੰਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਹੁਸੈਨ ਦੇ ਜੋੜ ਦਾ ਕਿੱਸਾ ਲਾਜਵੰਤੀ ਨੇ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਹੈ। ਪਾਠਕ ਦਾਰਾ ਸ਼ਿਕੋ ਦੀ ਗਵਾਹੀ ਵੇਖ ਲੈਣ ਅਤੇ ਸੋਚ ਲੈਣ ਅਤੇ ਨਿਰਣਾ ਕਰ ਲੈਣ ਕਿ ਇਸ਼ਕ ਨੂੰ ਇਹੋ ਜਿਹਾ ਰਿਵਾਜ ਦੇਣਾ ਹੁਸੈਨ ਦੇ ਤਸੱਵੁਫ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਦਾਗ ਲਾਣਾ ਨਹੀਂ। ਮੋਹਨ ਸਿੰਘ ਦੀਵਾਨਾ ਬੜੀ ਓਥੈਂਟਿਸਿਟੀ ਨਾਲ ਬੋਲਦੇ, ਉਹ ਇੱਦਾਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਬੋਲਦੇ। ਫਿਰ ਮਾਧੋ ਬਾਹਮਣ ਛੋਕਰੇ ਨੂੰ ਘਰ ਬੈਠਿਆਂ ਹਰਿਦੁਆਰ ਇਸ਼ਨਾਨ ਕਰਵਾਉਣ ਅਤੇ ਉਸ ਨੂੰ ਮੋਏ ਨੂੰ ਦੁਬਾਰਾ ਜਿੰਦਾ ਕਰਨ ਦੇ, ਇਹ ਕਰਾਮਾਤਾਂ ਤਾਂ ਹਰ ਇੱਕ ਸੂਫੀ ਨਾਲ ਚੇਲੇ ਚਪਟੇ ਜੋੜ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਨੇ। What I mean to say, we should try to understand the nuances of the Janam Sakhis, Baba Nanak ਨਾਲ ਵੀ ਤਾਂ ਇਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੀ ਕਰੀ, and the Tazkaras, or such kind of things which underscore the charismas of, ਜਾਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਕਰਾਮਾਤਾਂ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਉਹ ਦੱਸਦੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਨੇ। ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ ਤਾਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਮਤਲਬ ਜੇ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਸਿੰਬਲਿਜ਼ਮ ਦੀ ਸਮੈਟਿਕਸ ਦੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਸਮਝ ਹੈਗੀ ਫਿਰ ਤਾਂ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਫਿਰ ਨਹੀਂ ਇਹ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਹੱਥ ਨਾ ਪਾਓ ਕਾਈਂਡਲੀ, ਬਿਕੋਜ਼ all Sufi poetry, all devotional poetry, or Guru Granth Sahib is all metaphorical, all metaphorical. So where is the Madho? Now the next question, my question is, and also to Professor Sarbpreet, it's not a question, it's my observations as a student of a culture, that where is the Madho in the Kafis of Shah Hussain? Nowhere. The Kafis edited by Professor Mohan Singh Diwana, Madho is nowhere. ਸਾਡੇ ਕੋਲੇ ਬੇਸਿਕ ਸੋਰਸ ਕੀ ਹੈਗਾ? ਸਾਡੇ ਕੋਲੇ ਬੇਸਿਕ ਸੋਰਸ, ਪ੍ਰਾਇਮਰੀ ਸੋਰਸ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਉਹ ਤਾਂ ਕਾਫੀਆਂ ਨੇ ਨਾ। ਇਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਟੂ ਇਲੂਮਨ ਦੀ ਫਿਲਸੋਫਿਕਲ ਫੇਸਟ ਆਫ ਬਾਬਾ ਫਰੀਦ, ਬਾਬਾ ਨਾਨਕ ਐਂਡ ਸ਼ਾਹ ਹੁਸੈਨ, should we relies on the Janam Sakhis, Tazkaras, or Freed Bani, or Baba's Bani, or the Bani of Shah Hussain? ਇਹ ਅਸੀਂ ਡਿਸਾਈਡ ਕਰਨਾ ਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਕਿਸ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਕਰਨੀ ਹੈਗੀ ਆ। ਸੋ ਐਕਚੁਅਲੀ ਦੀ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮੈਟਿਕ is how to visit a text, how to visit a text, how to read a text, and how to constitute a text. Because text is not just like an official archives that you go there and gather and get it xeroxed and write it down. No. Particularly when you enter into the domain of devotionality or mysticism, you are supposed to be well versed in all these things. Now, so Ishq Mizaji is a tool of the Sufis to illumine the centrality of the longing or the yearning. Don't take the meaning, literal meaning of Ishq Mizaji. A devotee does not want her longing to be consummated. मैं ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ एक गल दसां, सूफीइज्म ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਾਂ ਭਗਤੀ ਟ੍ਰੈਡੀਸ਼ਨ ਜਾਂ ਗੁਰਮਤ ਟ੍ਰੈਡੀਸ਼ਨ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੋਈ ਵੀ ਭਗਤ ਸੂਫੀ ਬਾਬਾ ਜੀ ਇਹ ਨਹੀਂ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ ਕਿ ਮੇਰੀਆਂ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਲੌਂਗਿੰਗਸ ਨੇ, ਯਰਨਿੰਗ ਫॉर ਦੀ ਬਿਲਵਡ ਹੈ, ਉਹ ਸਿਰੇ ਚੜ ਜਾਣ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਹੈ ਹੀ ਸੂਫੀਜ਼ਮ ਹੀ ਇਸ 'ਚ ਹੈ, ਕੰਜ਼ਿਊਮੇਸ਼ਨ 'ਚ ਤਾਂ ਹੈ ਹੀ ਨਹੀਂ। ਜਿਹੜੀ ਇੱਕ ਬੰਦੇ ਦੇ ਅੰਦਰ ਇੱਕ ਲੌਂਗਿੰਗ ਹੈ ਨਾ, ਉਹੀ ਤੜਫਣਾ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਹੈਗੀ ਆ, ਉਹੀ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਫਿਲਸੋਫੀਕਲ ਅਤੇ ਰਿਫਲੈਕਟਿਵ ਬਣਾਉਂਦੀ ਹੈਗੀ ਹੈ। ਡਿਟਰਮਿਨਿਸਟਿਕ ਪਤਾ ਨਹੀਂ, ਅਸੀਂ ਡਿਟਰਮਿਨਿਸਟਿਕ ਅਸੀਂ ਸਿੱਖ ਲਿਆ ਬਹੁਤ ਕੁਛ, ਸਾਨੂੰ ਵੈਸਟ ਨੇ ਸਿਖਾਇਆ ਵੀ ਕੀ ਕੀਤਾ ਜਾਵੇ। ਸੋ ਨੀਦਰ ਦਮੋਦਰ ਗੁਲਾਟੀ ਨੌਰ ਸ਼ਾਹ ਹੁਸੈਨ ਨੌਰ ਬੁੱਲੇ ਸ਼ਾਹ ਵਾਰਿਸ ਸ਼ਾਹ, ਦੇ ਹੈਵ ਨੈਵਰ ਸੀਨ ਹੀਰ। ਹੀਰ ਤਾਂ ਕਿਸੇ ਨੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਦੇਖੀ, ਪਰ ਵਾਰਿਸ ਸ਼ਾਹ ਜਦੋਂ ਹੀਰ ਲੱਗਦਾ, ਅਗਲ ਕਹਿੰਦਾ ਵੀ ਐਂ ਲੱਗਦਾ ਜਿਵੇਂ ਦੇਖੀ ਹੋਈ ਹੈ ਯਾਰ ਹੀਰ, ਐਨੀ ਜ਼ਬਰਦਸਤ ਉਹਦੀ ਤਸਵੀਰ ਕਸ਼ੀ ਕਰਦਾ ਉਹ ਕਿ ਉਹ ਤਾਂ ਹੀਰ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਰਿਹਾ। ਦਿਸ ਇਜ਼ ਦੀ ਬਿਊਟੀ of a poet which we miss as a author. So are we witnessed? No, last point. ਉਸ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਮੈਂ ਇੱਕ ਛੋਟੀ ਜਿਹੀ ਨਜ਼ਮ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਸੁਣਾਵਾਂਗਾ। Are we interested in the homosexuality of Michel Foucault or his contribution to the domain of philosophy? Are we interested in the personal poverty of Karl Marx or his concept of poverty? Are we interested in Shiv Kumar, who was a drunken, or Shiv Kumar as a poet? It is up to we people that we have to decide all these things. And now, last few lines. This is not mine. मैं ख्याल हूँ किसी और का, मुझे सोचता कोई और है। सरे आईना मेरा अक्स है, पसे आईना कोई और है। मैं किसी के दस्ते तलब में हूँ तो किसी के हर्फ दुआ में हूँ। मैं नसीब हूँ किसी और का, मुझे मांगता कोई और है। तुझे दुश्मनों की खबर न थी, तुझे दुश्मनों की खबर न थी, मुझे दोस्तों का पता नहीं। मेरी दास्तां कोई और थी, तेरी दास्तां कोई और थी, मेरा वाक़या कोई और है। कभी लौट आएं तो पूछना नहीं, देखना उन्हें गौर से, जिन्हें रास्ते में खबर हुई ये रास्ता कोई और है। थैंक यू वेरी मच फॉर दिस।
Friends, you'll agree with me, President God has transformed us into another world. Most of us, I was watching, we forgot the concept of time. Normally I check my watch. This evening I haven't checked my watch. I don't know what the time is. I don't know. So that is the beauty, his profundity of knowledge, how he has been able to convey to highly learned, to less learned like me, and to the younger people. So for this we thank him. Mrs. Anita Singh was very keen to join this function. Today is a bad day. First we thought of cancelling this or postponing this function. Then we said, no, Sarbpreet Singh, let us have the function. So she sends her apologies. She couldn't join us. And I request President Madan Gopal Singh to say his presidential remarks. Anji? Bolo? Please. Zarur. Yes, bilkul sun.
So first of all, I would like to thank Dr. Gaur for his extremely erudite and amazing comments. The depth of his knowledge on the subject is clearly unparalleled. I just wanted to add a couple of things to Dr. Gaur's remarks and talk about how I personally dealt with some of the conundrums that he alluded to. I have, of course, read Mohan Singh Divana ji, and I read Lajvanti Ramakrishna ji's published work as well about Shah Hussain. One of the things that I do want to address is the nature of the relationship between Shah Hussain and Madho. As Dr. Gaur observed, Dr. Lajvanti Ramakrishna makes references to it, and then towards the end of her section on Madholal Hussain, she backtracks a little. She talks about the fact that she sees nothing immoral in the relationship between Madho and Shah Hussain, and then she alludes to Persian and Greek influences that might have, caused what was written about Madholal Hussain to be written. I also want to talk about what modern scholars have to say about Shah Hussain and Madho and their relationship, in particular Western scholars, Scott Kugel being the most prominent. So there are allusions, and by the way, Dara Shikoh's writings on the Sufis and Shah Hussain in particular are deep and insightful. And unlike Professor Saab, I'm not an expert in Sufism, so I would freely acknowledge that whatever in the book appears about Sufi practice is very largely taken from Dara Shikoh's work, the works that you mentioned in your talk. So coming back to Scott Kugel and other scholars of his ilk, there was one source that Dr. Mohan Singh Divana did not have access to when he wrote his book, and that was Hakikat al-Fukra, which was written by one of not Shah Hussein's murids, but Madho's murids, because Madho succeeded Shah Hussain as the head of his Sufi order after him. So Scott Kugel's thesis, Scott Kugel is of the view that Shah Hussain and Madho definitely had a romantic relationship, and he bases his observations mostly on the Hakikat al-Fukra. So the writer of the Hakikat al-Fukra, whose complete name escapes me at the moment, writes in great detail about the initiation of Madho at the hands of Shah Hussain. And Kugel argues that if you read the description of the initiation, how can you have any doubt that they were lovers? Okay, but there's a problem here. The writer of the Hakikat al-Fukra was not a murid of Shah Hussein's, he was a murid of Madho. So he was not present when he documented, what he documented was not something that he had witnessed, it was probably something that he had heard. So that leaves you with the question, what was their relationship? What was the true nature of their relationship? Because there are definitely two opinions. I personally came to the conclusion that we are never going to know. And I also came to the conclusion that it's okay that we don't know. It doesn't matter. Mohan Singh Divana लिखदे ने कि ये दाग लाया जाता हैगा Shah Hussain te. Why do we have to look at it as daag laya janda? Who are we to judge? We know that Madho and Shah Hussain were close. So close that today they lie in the same mazar outside Lahore. So close that their very names have merged, their identities have merged. Ishq ta hega si na. Oh, keho ja ishq si, kis tarah asi ki lena utton? You know, who are we to judge? There are many metaphysical mysteries that will never be answered fully. So what I say is, let this remain a metaphysical mystery as well, because all metaphysical mysteries ultimately enrich us. From my personal perspective, the beauty of Shah Hussein's Kafis is not diminished a whit depending on what the nature of the relationship between Madho and Shah Hussain was. कोई असर नहीं आंदा उन्हां ते ओनियां ही सोहणियां हो रहणियां ने ओनियां ही उन्हां ने साडे दिलां नूं छोड़ियां ने and ultimately the place where I come to is क्यों असीं झातियां मारी जाने आ? You know why? Why this curiosity? I mean, do we take some sort of salacious joy in speculating about what the nature of the relationship was? You know, ਇਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੀਆਂ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਰੂਮੀ ਤੇ ਸ਼ਮਸ ਬਾਰੇ ਵੀ ਹੁੰਦੀਆਂ ਨੇ, right? ਨਿਜ਼ਾਮੁਦੀਨ ਔਲੀਆ ਤੇ ਹਜ਼ਰਤ ਅਮੀਰ ਖੁਸਰੋ ਬਾਰੇ ਵੀ ਹੁੰਦੀਆਂ ਨੇ. Doesn't matter. Whatever those relationships were, they were. And this notion that these things are foreign and they didn't exist in Indian culture and they came from Persia or they came from Greece, I mean, you know, in this day and age, we know that that is simply not true. So I, really thank Dr. Gaur and, Professor Madan Gopal Singh ji in a similar conversation a couple of days ago covered exactly the same ground. The canvas that this novel covers, to me, was awe-inspiring. And, everything that Dr. Gaur talked about, the notion of taking all of these threads of history and trying to synthesize them into a cohesive narrative, that was what really, really sort of inspired me as I was writing this novel. And I can tell you that having both of these scholars, I promise you, we did not have any conversations before they made their comments. And I'm being facetious, of course, I'm being tongue-in-cheek. The acknowledgement of the canvas from both of these scholars is something very, very precious that I'm going to take away from the last session and this one. So from the bottom of my heart, I thank you both for your nuanced, comprehensive, and your very generous response to my work. Thank you so much.
Why don't you see this also as a political statement? Why do we still remain defensive and elusive that this is not something that we should jati marofai or check it, but this could also be a political statement against the heterosexuality normative. And that is a very important point to make.
No, fair enough, absolutely fair.
May I now request Professor Madan Gopal Singh to give his initial remarks. Initially, I requested him to talk in the panel about this. He says that won't be morally right because I've already spoken on the book. So I said, in any case, you join us. So he's very kindly agreed to join us. It's a difficult day, and I think we really need to thank all of you. Anita Singh couldn't get the Uber taxi. Our driver is unwell, and she says, I'm enjoying on my computer, and she's listening to this. I request Madan Kumar Singh to
Something? Yeah, okay. Yeah, well, thank you very much, Professor Gaur, and thank you very much, Virji, for your wonderful sort of, after the main talk, the comments that you made. I have 2 or 3 very brief points to make. One, of course, is if you go back to Rumi, and Rumi speaks about, first of all, he speaks a lot in negatives. So he will not tell you who he is. So he's talking about, in this context, na az dunya, na az uqba, na az dunya, na az uqba, na az jannat, na az dozakh. That's, na az Adam, na az Hawa, na az Firdaus Rizwanam. So there is a clear challenge that he's posing. And then he says, Makanam la makam barshad. Homeless am I. Nishanam bi nishan barshad. I do not have a trace. Na tan barshad, na jan barshad, ki man as jane jananam. That is what the Nightingale is all about. Ki man as jane jananam. I'm very deeply moved when I come to a point in that novel when this wounded scholar who has moved beyond fiqh, that is jurisprudence, but also tafsir in a manner of speaking, which is exegesis, and has chosen the street in a manner of speaking. He's lying wounded. But what is very fascinating is the emergence next to this wounded, discarded scholar, the presence of a young girl who's been thrown out, who is now motherless because nobody knows where the mother is. And through that girl, the whole idea of gendering being explored, the transformation of the gender, and in a manner of speaking, the authorial voice which is attributed to Maqbool and Maqboola is deeply moving. And I'm talking now about the economy of discourse in the process of writing. So you have a trope. That is one brief comment that I wanted to make. And my second comment is the question of intentionality. Salu is a traveling piece of cloth. It's not static. The threads have come from diverse sources. The third line of each stanza is the most important line. The third line is the line of intentionality, of volition. Jana karke rah. That is important. Ditte tang beha. Sutti shauk Allah. Kis pe आँखां जा होर न कीता जा तुद जेहा कोई ना जाना बिखड़े राह. The question of volition is so important. Challe kumkuma. सालू दा रंग जावना मुड़ फेर ना जगते आपना चले कुमकुमा. सालू मेरा उनिंदा. Now the translation which is available to us, गौर साहब मैं बड़ी माजरत चाहना कि I think we are today at a place where we have to revisit Professor Mohan Singh Divana's writings with a renewed critical vigor. It's very important. Because the thing is, Salu Mera Uninda. Uninda, in my opinion, this is my interpretation, is not made out of wool. It's a dreaming Salu. Salu mera uninda, koi sham Vrindavan suninda. But the third line, Jana bikhdera. That is where the crux is. So at this level, the whole idea of nafs is re-established into a paradox. The idea of nafs is not very easily settled. When Kabir says, Jugana Jugana ham jogi, आए न जाए मिटे न कब हूं शब्द अनाहत भोगी सब ही ठोर जमात हमारी सब ही ठोर पे मेला हम सब माए सबू हम माए हम हैं बहुरी अकेला. These are not easily settled questions. And when I was reading the novel, these three threads, one where he rises to his own sort of, volition and subjectivity. He says, no, I don't want to do fiqh and I don't want to do tafsir. I want to read the banned book. That's important. And in getting to read that banned book, if I get thrashed, then so be it. So he is out on the street, wounded, and there is this girl who's appearing motherless. And then the two of them live together. And at the level of her pubescence, she begins to get transformed into what appears to be a man, but she's not a man. She's something in between. So the in between is very important. And that is one very important, and then moving beyond time. Maqbool doesn't die. Maqbool is there. So I am interested in the economy of discourse with which the entire novel is conceptualized. And for me, therefore, and there are many spaces, he speaks about Sama, he speaks about Zikr. I mean, this is the last thing that I'm saying. What is Zikr? Zikr is remembrance. And what is Sama? Sama is hearing. And together the two would result in the formation of a community. Why do we want to form a community? I mean, the political intent of Shah Hussain merges ever so tightly with the idea of the individually lived anxieties, including sexual questions. Those are not unimportant questions at all. So, I'm really glad that some filmmakers sitting in the Konkan region who read your novel, and he rang up and he said, Madanji, I want to do a film. I said, you don't know Punjabi. How will you do a film? You are a Konkan, you know a little bit of Hindi, and you know English, you don't know Punjabi. So he said, no. The way the poems have been translated by him, and this is the last point that I have to make. I have also translated Shah Hussain into English. Naveed Alam has also translated Shah Hussain into English. But the thing is that he is translating, in fact, he has a strange narrative strategy, which is that the chapter of the novel is just a poem. Why? Now, I thought about that. The chapter is in the form of a poem because he's worked on that poem. And in what way? He has created a metrical, not replica, but a metrical parallel to the Kafi. I would shudder, I would not go anywhere near Shah Hussein's Kafi to even attempt that. But let me compliment you that these metrical things, and you're working with the principles of what is known as metaphor and metonymy in literature, you have worked exceedingly well. All those condensation and displacements which are happening in your translations are the finest that I've come across. And I really we must celebrate this book. The point is, at the end of the day, the book needs to be celebrated. Thank you. Oh, do we have some time to listen to at least one coffee? 5 minute है क्या नहीं? एक कॉफी तो सुन लीजिए.
No, I don't. No, you do not. But if you read the one chapter of this book, it's sheer economy. Just read it. I will. But it's not a time to intervene all these things. What's the difference between literature and all these things? Yes, please.
So I'm actually going to offer a coffee that does not appear in the novel. If you ask me why, I don't have an answer. It is one of my favorite coffees, and again, in my limited understanding, it really speaks to the heart of Shah Hussein's Malamati soul, particularly one of the verses. मंदी हाँ कि चंगी हाँ, मंदी हाँ कि चंगी हाँ, भी साहिब तेरी बंदी हाँ, मंदी हाँ कि चंगी हाँ, मंदी हाँ कि चंगी हाँ, गहला लोक जाने दीवानी, गहला लोक जाने दीवानी में रंग साहिब दे रंगी हाँ, मंदी हाँ कि चंगी हाँ. अगली लाइन तक गौर करो. साजन मेरा अखीं विच वसदा, साजन मेरा अखीं विच वसदा, मैं गलिए फिरां निसंगी हाँ, मंदी हाँ कि चंगी हाँ. कहे हुसैन फकीर साईदा, कहे हुसैन फकीर साईदा, मैं वर चंगे नाल मंगी हाँ, मंदी हाँ कि चंगी हाँ, मंदी हाँ कि चंगी हाँ, भी साहिब तेरी बंदी हाँ, मंदी हाँ कि चंगी हाँ, मंदी हाँ कि चंगी हाँ, मंदी हाँ, मंदी हाँ, मंदी हाँ कि चंगी हाँ.
Professor Madan Gopal talked about celebration. As a part of celebration, publishers agreed that they'll give you a discount of 25% if the books are purchased here, and the author will be happy to sign. So you're welcome to buy the book. Now, 2 more programs are in the pipeline. This year is a birth centenary of a Punjabi writer, Mohinder Singh Sarna, who was the father of Navtej Sarna, the ambassador. And this will be celebrated here on 27th, 28th September. Please do join today's function. If you registered before, we'll provide lunch, tea, and all other facilities. And then they talked of Professor Harjeet Singh Gill. 2 books by his students will be released here on, I think, November 10 at 4 p.m. Sachkhand Vase Nirinkar and Doli Chaddi Hamariyan Heer Kuka, Chika or Kuka, whatever. And Gaur will be the right person to answer. Dr. Neki used to tell me that this is not in the original Doli Chaddi. But still, it has become a part of our oral history, so we should not debate whether it's right or wrong. But it's in any case important. And may I now request our General Secretary and Principal of the Khalsa College, Dr. Jaswinder Singh, to say words of thanks. Please.
Thank you, sir. We are all, extremely happy to listen, to the scholars today. Madan and Sarbpreet ji, I'm listening you for the first time. Madan, in fact, he is a pride of University of Delhi, of course, in number of ways. And he is a very special, combination of, he has the great legacy of his father, the literary understanding, and not only that, the way he has made the audience understand the Punjabi literature is very, very unique. He accepted the invitation to preside on today's function. Thank you very much for that. I have read Professor Ishwar Dayal Gaurji, but I am meeting him for the first time. I'm really, tremendously benefited in a number of ways. The way you engross your audience in your talk is marvelous. And, the way you gave the analysis, I think Professor Mahinder Singh, Dr. Mahinder Singh was absolutely right that you had transcended us to a different world when you are, in fact, narrating the true significance of, the text, the Sufi's Nightingale. I do not know because I have not read the book as such, but, the way both the speakers have spoken about the book is really very good. And I'm sure, the way Ishwar Dayalji has, portrayed the book, It gives a lot of historicity and the importance why the younger generation should read the earlier texts. This will connect, Gurbani, Sufi in a new way. But the only problem is that in a city like Delhi, which is so busy, to take the students to this requires a very special skill by the teachers. The reading habits, the with our virasat, with our legacy is very, very important. Sarbpreet ji, I would only request you to kindly interact with our students in University of Delhi. I do not know how long you would be here, but I would definitely like you to come to University of Delhi if you are here. I would also, specially request Ishwar Dayal ji that we will have a very special lecture in, Khalsa College, let these students' elections be over. Even though I shall be retiring, but, from the college, but, we have a tradition of inviting good scholars, and all three of you, we have had the privilege of listening Madan and, listening him also, and he always, gives us this privilege of being with us. But both of you, in one way or the other, I'm sure, your kind of scholarship is required by the younger generations. Thank you very much for coming here and, discussing all this with us. And I'm also grateful to Dr. Mahinder Singh ji, who made this possible. Thank you very much.
We also need to thank in absentia Anita Singh. In absentia.
What are you thanking her? I thought she is a right finalist.
She was listening all the time. Thank you.
I miss her. Please tell her.